After owning a affordable Flieger watch for some time, after wearing that, enjoying it, and liking it much more than I expected that I would, I decided to upgrade the watch, decided to spend a lot more money to buy something extra special, which is why I ended up buying this Classic 40 by Stowa. But has spending that extra amount of money, quite a lot of extra amount of money, been a good decision? Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I am talking about watches. And I have to admit, even now that I have owned Pilot watches for some time, even now that I've owned this Stowa for some time, it still surprises me how much I like this style of watch. It's not a style of watch that I expected that I would like. And I certainly didn't expect to spend this amount of money on this style of watch, because when I bought this Stowa Classic 40, it was the most expensive watch purchase I had made. This watch cost me 1,270 euros. Now, please be aware you can subtract some tax from that if you don't live in the EU, but you probably have to add your own tax on it. And in fact, I ended up spending a slightly little bit less than that, because when I was speaking to Stowa about this watch, they offered me a very small discount. I did pay for the majority of this watch, but because I did get that very small discount, I have put that sponsored icon up there in the corner there, and I'm going to leave a link directly to the Stowa website down below. And that price, well, there's a couple of considerations. Firstly, it does change a little bit depending on which watch you buy, which movement, which style of watch from Stowa that you buy. But the most thing that I want to concentrate on today is spending that amount of money on this style of watch worth it? Has it been worth it to me? Has it been the right buying decision for me, or should I have stuck with the much more affordable version? Or should I perhaps considered other watches within this sort of style? Because I'm very aware that a Type B Flieger, at least from a little bit of a distance, looks like a Type B Flieger, whether it is a cheap watch or an expensive watch. So that is why it's taken so long for me to then bring out this review, because I've had this watch in my collection for some time, because I've really wanted to understand this watch, and I've really wanted to understand the question, or the answer to the question, was this the right buying decision, and should I recommend it to you guys? So let's flip the camera. Let me do a review of this watch. But then I want to come back and speak about the price and answer that question, because I think it's a rather important question to ask yourselves if you're considering one of these watches. But for now, let me just show you the watch. When my Stowa Classic 40 Type B Flieger arrived, it arrived in a massive outer cardboard box, but within that box was this wooden box. It says here it's made in the Black Forest. And when you buy a Stowa, you're buying from a heritage Pilot brand. This one here contains a Sleater hand winding movement, but there are some other options available. You can go automatic or this hand winding movement. It has heat blued hands, 50 meters of water resistance, and sapphire crystals front and back. Now, as I mentioned, there are some options available when you're buying a Classic 40. Obviously, Type B Flieger and also Type A Fliegers, but you can also get them with or without the date, and you can also get them automatic or manual wind. I've chosen to go for a Type B Flieger because that's my preference. I've strangely enough chosen to go for one with a date, which I wouldn't have expected to do, but there's something about that that just adds a little bit of character to this particular style. And I chose to go with the manual winding version of this Sleater because I think it suits this style of watch. For me, it just feels like it should be a hand winding movement. And also it then helps with the overall height of the watch, making it a touch thinner. There are also two strap choices, a dark brown or this more sort of caramel camel sort of color. And there are different lengths of straps as well, so you get to choose the one that suits your size wrist the best. And as the name denotes, the Classic 40, that means the case is 40 millimeters. The height of this watch with that manual movement is only 9 millimeters. If you choose to go for the automatic, it adds an extra millimeter, making it 10 millimeters. The lug to lug of this one is 48.4 millimeters, 20 millimeter lug width, and on this beautiful supplied leather strap, it weighs in at 67 grams. This is a fairly traditional looking Type B Flieger, having a matte black dial. Everything on that dial then is printed. Some have loom applied, some parts don't, and I'll show you that shortly because it's an interesting feature of this watch. But as you can see, there's no branding on it either. It has the outer ring from the 5 around to the 55, and then the inner ring 1 around to 12, and the arrow there at the 12. As I mentioned, I chose the one with the date. It has a little porthole there at the 6 o'clock. If you choose the one without, it just has 30 there. And I just liked this little bit of movement on the dial, and it breaks it up just a little bit, which is quite interesting. There's a heap of lume in the hands. You'll see, as you would expect with this style of watch, we have a stubby little hour hand, a nice long minute hand, and a very slender long second hand. And these hands, those main hands, are heat treated blue. So the hour hand and minute hand are heat treated blue, and the counterbalance of the second hand is black, so that sort of almost fades into the dial. Now, the lume of this watch, let's have a look at the lume because it's interesting. I like the fact that they haven't loomed everything, because after dark it's almost a bit of a surprise. However, I do need to tell you a story about the lume of this watch, because when it arrived on my doorstep. I started looking at this watch really closely. I started looking at this watch overnight, and I realized there were bits missing on the lume. There were actually sections missing off the dial. I ended up contacting Stowa. They immediately got back to me. They had the watch collected from my door, and it was fixed and back to me within 2 weeks. So disappointing from the fact that the watch wasn't perfect on arrival, but I have to say, probably the best customer service that I've ever had from any watch company. And covering that very cool Type B Flieger dial is a mildly double-domed sapphire crystal, and it is a beautiful sapphire crystal. In fact, it almost disappears in certain angles because I think there is some AR coating. However, I'm not sure how much of it there is, but as you can see, as you move it through the studio lights, it is still a very legible watch. And as you probably expect, the entire watch is brushed. Circular brushing around that bezel as you would expect, circular brushing on the tops of those lugs, and a nice lateral brushing across the sides. And it's a really nice brushing. It has a really nice look to it. It almost glints in the sunlight or in the studio lights, which is nice. And you'll see if you focus in on this side of the case where it meets the bezel, there's a tiny little step as well, which is quite an interesting feature because it sort of gives a bit more of a 3D effect. You see it's an unguarded onion crown, which is what we expect for this particular style of watch. There is no logo or anything on there, but there is plenty of texture and interest factor already, so I don't think it needs that. This one only has 50 meters of water resistance, so it's not screw down. And of course, this one is a manual wind watch, so it is manual winding, and it has a beautiful, nice winding action. In fact, it is beautiful. Obviously, it has the date there, so it does have a quick set position, but at the full out position, it does hack the movement. Looking at the back of the watch, you'll see that screw-on caseback is also all brushed with a whole heap of information telling you that's a sapphire crystal made in Germany. But the showstopper of this one is that manual wind SW210 top grade movement. It's a beautiful looking manual wind movement. It is one of the big reasons why I chose this particular watch over others. I felt that it just suited this style of watch, but you can get the automatic version as well. I do like how they've got Stowa put there on the main plate. Now, having that top grade Sellita movement means it should be performing very well, and it'd be quite interesting to see how this one is performing. And to do that, let's stick it on my time grapher. Well, I have to say I'm pretty happy with those figures. As you can see, it was running at 28,800 vibrations per hour, being a high beat movement, virtually no beat error, nice healthy amplitude, and running about plus 7 seconds per day. So this one's running very nicely, and it is so nice just to look at this particular movement. It's a very pretty movement, blued screws, and it's underneath a sapphire crystal. Now, as I mentioned, there are a couple of different strap options. I think they look exactly the same except for the color. This is the light brown, has the double rivets there as you would kind of expect from a Flieger style watch. Really nicely looking underneath as well. Stowa branded, all leather, very supple as well, straight out of the packaging. Has 3 keepers, a solid one there, a metal one, and then one you can move, and Stowa branding on the buckle. With the dimensions of this watch and me having a 17 centimeter wrist, as I expected, it fits very, very nicely. In fact, it's like a perfect fit to my wrist, and you can see how it sits down so nicely on wrist. This has been a lovely on-wrist experience watch, and it is one of the standout features about it. So what do I like about this watch? What don't I like about it? And what would I change? Well, there's very little that I don't like, and there's very little that I'll change because I like almost everything about this watch. I love this style of watch. I love that date window, giving it a little bit of a difference. I like those blue hands, nice long second hand, which is nice. I really enjoy looking at that movement. I love how thin it is, and it has a beautiful strap that then ends up fitting nicely on my wrist. What don't I like? Well, if I wasn't me, I might have an issue with the price. But for me, I'm okay with that price, and I'm going to talk about that again shortly. If I was going to change anything, there's actually only one thing that I probably would change, and I'm not sure if it might ruin this watch. I'd love to see a very, very, very tiny polished chamfer. It doesn't need it, and I'm not sure if it would actually ruin the whole sort of feeling of this style of watch, but it would probably be kind of nice to have that tiny little extra bit of light play. It doesn't need it, but if I was to try and change anything, that would probably be the thing that I would pick. But as I mentioned, I want to talk about price because I think this watch will suit certain people and not others. To go into some more detail, let's get back to me. At around 2,000 Australian dollars, this is not a cheap watch, especially for a watch that from a distance pretty much looks the same as any other Type B Flieger. Not to say that it is the same as any other Type B Flieger, but from a distance it pretty much does. For me, for somebody that loves pilot watches, for somebody that really, really enjoys this particular style of watch, it has been the right decision for me. I'm so glad that I took that leap of faith, that I spent this money on this watch because I love it. I wear it all the time, I enjoy it, and I understand the differences between my more affordable one that I ended up selling and this watch. I get a much better on-wrist experience and I love it that much more. However, if you're not that kind of person, if you like pilot watches and you would like one in your collection, but it's not really your main focus, if it's just a watch within the collection, not a priority within the collection, then I'm not sure if this is the sort of money that should be spent because there are other options. Obviously, if you want to spend some extra cash, then I think this is probably a really good watch to consider, but I certainly understand why possibly it might not be the right one for you. And as I said, if you are interested in a pilot watch, but it's not your main focus, I'd look at some of the cheaper options that are out there. And I want to show you a side-by-side with a cheaper watch that's out there, and that's exactly what I'm going to do tomorrow. In the day after the release of this particular video, I'm going to do a side-by-side with my Stoa and a Laco, which is about 1/4 of the price. So stick around to check that video out. And whilst we wait for that video, maybe watch these ones next.